It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. The Marc Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Marc is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Marc Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. You're welcome to call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580 and give us the benefit of your views. This is where we discuss the important legal and political issues of the day. You can send me a tweet at Marc Scaringi, and I'll read your tweet on the air. For all my columns, prior podcasts of the show, and a look at some great merchandise we have, check out the marcscaringishow.com. And today we're broadcasting on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live once again. So you can send your comments in live, and we'll try to reply in real time. Well, CNN's Jim Acosta wins the first round of his lawsuit against President Trump and the White House. A federal district court ruled yesterday that the White House must immediately restore the press pass of CNN reporter Jim Acosta. Now, this is a temporary restraining order and will stay in place for a temporary period of time. It will soon be converted into what's referred to as a preliminary injunction, and that will stay in place until there is an immediate appeal by the White House, if there is. The underlying legal action will continue. So this is just a win on round one for CNN, Jim Acosta, and the other news agencies and organizations, including Fox News, that supported the CNN Acosta lawsuit against the Trump White House. Now, because the judge ruled in favor of CNN, that means, on a temporary restraining order, that means the judge believes CNN is likely to prevail on at least the due process part of its lawsuit. The judge has ordered both parties to file a joint status report next week on how to proceed in the case. So this case is generating national headlines. It stems as a result of the decision by the White House to revoke Jim Acosta's White House press pass in light of the encounter that occurred between President Trump and Jim Acosta during the press conference that occurred the day after the general election, when Jim Acosta was repeatedly grandstanding and refusing the president's answers to certain questions and talking over the president, disrupting the president. And then Jim Acosta refusing initially to relinquish the White House microphone that had been handed to him by the young female intern. And after the president repeatedly informed Acosta to sit down, that that's enough, that his turn was over, and the young White House female intern attempted to retrieve the microphone from Acosta, Acosta initially refused to do so. So the day after, or that day, the White House revoked Jim Acosta's press pass, and Jim Acosta, CNN, and some other news organizations brought suit the very next day, or shortly thereafter, against the Trump White House and the president himself, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the chief of staff John Kelly, and some others, alleging Acosta and CNN's First Amendment rights and Fifth Amendment rights were violated. So Jim Acosta reported to work later Friday after the judge's decision, and there is a video of Acosta walking toward the booth, the secured booth that he needs to go through in order to get into the White House, and he is mobbed by reporters, cameramen, the press, if you will, covering itself, the press. And he's treated essentially as a conquering, returning hero as he walks through the gate to get into the White House. And interestingly, he declared that the First Amendment is a sacred right. And that's according to CNN's Jim Acosta. So apparently Jim Acosta believes the First Amendment, the right to free speech, comes from God. That's what a sacred right is. So that seems to be what Acosta is saying, but I wonder than if Jim Acosta of CNN also believes the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms comes from God as well. But that's an aside. It just reveals, in my opinion, the liberal reporter's belief that the First Amendment prohibition on Congress from passing a law abridging the right to free press is sacred, but of course other rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights, not so much. But that's just my take on the Jim Acosta declaration that the First Amendment is a sacred right, thus it comes from God. But in any event, CNN in this lawsuit argued the White House infringed upon Acosta's free press and CNN's free press and due process rights under the First and the Fifth Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. And CNN is arguing that it and its reporter have a constitutional right to the press pass, and that the White House was wrong to peremptorily confiscate Acosta's press pass without notice, without an explanation, without a hearing, giving Acosta or CNN the ability to object or to present their side of the story, so to speak. And that's what due process means. That's what it's all about, notice and a hearing before a government infringement upon a constitutional right. Now, the White House contended that it enjoys broad discretion concerning press conferences, including whom to allow in to participate. And the White House further explained that it can exclude reporters at any time for any reason. Now, the White House Correspondent Association, which of course sided with CNN, said the government's stance is wrong and dangerous. So it was dangerous for the White House to revoke Jim Acosta's press pass. A dangerous action by the White House, according to the White House Correspondents Association. Their lawyers wrote in a brief on Thursday, if the president were to have the absolute discretion to strip a correspondent of a hard pass, of a press pass, the chilling effect would be severe in the First Amendment protections afforded journalists to gather and report news on the activities on the president would be largely eviscerated. Wow, that's quite a statement that is redolent with hyperbole. All the president did was revoke one reporter's press pass. CNN could have sent a different reporter later that day or the following day, and CNN would continue to be able to cover the White House through the press room. But apparently CNN wanted a particular reporter, and the president didn't want that particular reporter. So according to CNN and the White House Correspondents Association, we have a constitutional crisis now. Now, also, notwithstanding that extreme hyperbole of the statement from the Associated Press, Acosta was not gathering and reporting the news. Acosta was arguing with the president and trying to make the president accept Acosta's opinion about what phrase was acceptable to use to describe the migrant caravan. And the president called it an invasion. Acosta had challenged him about the president's earlier characterization that it was an invasion. Acosta refused that word and objected to the president using it. I mean, it was a ridiculous experience. Jim Acosta countering the president and refusing to accept the president's answer and refusing to accept the president's choice of words. But that's the status of the lawsuit. We'll talk more about the CNN Jim Acosta lawsuit, the decision in their favor on Friday. After we return from this brief commercial break, you're listening to the Marc Scaringi Show.
Now back to the Marc Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. Call in 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. And tell us what you think. Did President Trump and the White House make the right decision to revoke CNN Jim Acosta's press pass, barring Jim Acosta from CNN from continuing to attend and participate in White House press conference briefings. As we know, the federal district court yesterday issued what's called a temporary restraining order in favor of Jim Acosta of CNN, ordering the White House to return his press pass to him and allow him to continue to participate in White House press conference briefings and continue to perform his press duties at the White House, while the underlying complaint that CNN and Acosta filed continues to work its way through the civil justice process. The judge issuing the temporary restraining order is a sign that the judge believes it is likely that Acosta and CNN will prevail ultimately on the merits of their suit. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm interested to know what my listeners think. Did the federal district court judge make the right decision to order the president to rescind the revocation of the press pass to Jim Acosta? Is the federal district court right to compel the president to return Jim Acosta to the White House briefing room? I want to hear your thoughts. Call in 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. Now, interestingly, the video of the encounter between Jim Acosta and the White House intern, who, remember, was attempting to retrieve the microphone from Acosta and hand it to the next reporter, was actually viewed in court. The judge viewed the video and concluded the claim by the White House that Acosta laid hands, quote, laid hands, end quote, on the staffer were likely untrue. And I think that's a very interesting statement made by the judge presiding over the case when it's clear the video does show Jim Acosta bringing his arm down, at least on two occasions, to block the arm and thus the hand of the young female intern who was attempting to take the microphone out of Jim Acosta's hand so that she could move it along to the next reporter. But, I guess everybody sees a video a different way and draws a different conclusion. That's the conclusion by the judge. I draw a different conclusion. I think Jim Acosta did make contact, and, that is certainly, I think, a problem with Jim Acosta being there. But the federal district court believed that he has a right to be there. In any event, the ruling is limited to the due process claim, and I think that's an important fact that needs to be publicized more. Jim Acosta, of course, when he returned to the White House as a result of the judge's order, was treated as a returning hero of the First Amendment and the right to free speech and the right to a free press. But that's not exactly what the ruling was on. The ruling was on the Fifth Amendment due process claim. The judge ruled that only in Acosta's Fifth Amendment claim, saying the White House didn't provide him with the due process required to legally revoke his press pass. Now, the judge referred to his ruling as very limited and didn't rule on Acosta's larger and, more important to the ultimate outcome of the case, his First Amendment claim. Now, importantly, the judge left open the possibility that the White House could still revoke Acosta's press pass, but only after notice and a hearing. So I'm not so sure about the correctness of the court's decision. Now, we know that the due process clause asserts that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. But I'm not convinced Jim Acosta of CNN, or anyone for that matter, has a liberty interest or a right to liberty to enter the White House. Just like Jim Acosta has no right to enter my house or your house without our permission. Now, the White House did give him permission when it issued the press pass to him, but then it revoked it. And I think that permission in the first place was more of a privilege as opposed to a right. And it should be able to be revoked for no reason, just like you're able to prohibit anyone from entering your home for any reason. Maybe you don't like them. Maybe you don't like the cut of their jib. Maybe you don't like their hairstyle. You don't like the jacket they're wearing. You can prohibit anyone from entering your home for any reason, except, of course, the government agents, if they have a valid, duly authorized warrant to enter your home. But that's not what we're talking about here. So I'm not convinced in the correctness of the judge's ruling on the Fifth Amendment right that apparently the court believes that Jim Acosta has a right a right to his liberty interest in being physically present in the White House, and that right cannot be removed with due process of law. Anyway, I would characterize it more of a privilege than a right, but the judge has reached a different conclusion. Now, Ted Boutrous, an outside attorney representing CNN, he said in light of the court ruling on Friday, yesterday that is, this is a great day for the First Amendment and journalism. Now remember, and that's the way the press is running with this, remember, the court did not rule on Acosta's First Amendment claim. So I think it's hard to declare this is a great victory for the First Amendment when that's not the claim the judge ruled on. He ruled on the Fifth Amendment claim. Now, the federal trial court that issued this ruling is under the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. And I think Judge Kelly, who presided over this case, or who is presiding over this case and issued that ruling yesterday, I think he is citing the 1977 case Sherrill v. Knight, which ruled that the Secret Service in that case violated the First Amendment when it denied a press pass to a reporter who posed, according to the court, no actual safety threat to the president, holding that security concerns are the only permissible grounds for denying such a press pass. So that was a 1977 U.S. Court of Appeals case that apparently Judge Kelly is relying upon. And also an interesting fact is that in this court proceeding, in the Acosta CNN court proceeding, is that Judge Kelly struggled with the Acosta case because the Department of Justice, the lawyers representing the White House, they weren't able to tell the judge exactly who in the Trump White House made the decision to revoke Acosta's press pass. And so there you see the judge having a little problem with the manner in which the government exercised its power to revoke the pass, in that the government couldn't even identify who in the government made the decision, let alone why the decision was made. So that's apparently captured the judge's attention, and he was concerned about that. Let's open up the phone lines. We'll take some calls. I want to hear from my listeners. Do you think the federal district court judge was right to order President Trump to return CNN's Jim Acosta to the White House briefing room? We'll talk to Joe from Pembroke. You're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Hey, Mark. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Great show. It sounded very much to me like a father chastising his child to be more polite, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I thought Trump was absolutely correct. I disagree with the judge. My question is, Mark, as a lawyer and a great lawyer, what's that all cost? I mean, I'm Joe middle class. I mean, if that happened to me and I got to go run up and get an appeal and do this and do that, but I mean, the money involved, how much do you think? I guess you can't really put a figure on it, but I would imagine the money involved is unbelievable. But thank you very much for letting me speak, and have a great day, sir.
Well, Joe, thanks for calling. Appreciate having the benefit of your views, and certainly it does cost a lot of money to pay for lawyers to engage in high stakes civil litigation. Not that we dissuade any of our friends and clients from paying their lawyers. That's a joke, of course. Yes. But, yeah, of course, it's going to be very, very costly for CNN to continue to litigate the case. You're only in the initial round of the case. The judge issued the temporary restraining order that'll be converted to a preliminary injunction. It looks like the White House is responding by doing what the Judge Kelly found the problem was, in that there weren't really any rules on how to determine whether or not to revoke a press pass. And so the White House now is in the process of writing those rules. So perhaps there will be some sort of settlement in this case, because it appears the White House is doing what the judge wants it to do, which is set forth some rules by which both the White House and those who have received press passes can govern themselves. And then if a reporter violates, breaches, disregards one of the rules that have been issued by the White House, then the White House would have a stronger case if, in fact, it decided to revoke that particular reporter's press pass. Now, that's kind of where the case is moving now, at least on a factual basis. The parties are, at least the White House, is now changing the way it's handling this as a result of the court ruling. I have some problems with that, and we'll talk about that when we return from the break. You're listening to the Marc Scaringi Show. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Now, more of Marc Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We talk about the important political and legal issues of the day. And I think we're certainly doing that. We're talking about a very important legal case that has obvious political ramifications. And that is CNN and Jim Acosta, their star, a White House reporter, sued the White House and the President of the United States and other high-ranking officials in charge of the communications and press operation of the White House very recently as a result of the president's, well, we think it's the president's decision. We're not quite sure. In fact, that's what the judge presiding over the case was a little troubled with. The government couldn't inform the court who it was who made the decision to revoke Jim Acosta's press pass as a result of that fiery press conference he had. It's like Jim Acosta is holding a press conference, and maybe that's part of the problem. Jim Acosta is just a reporter. Remember, he's there to gather the news. He's not there to spar with the president. He's not there to instruct the president of the United States what language, what words and phrases the president can use to describe an ongoing situation such as the migrant caravan. And that's what President Trump is so obviously frustrated about, and that he deals with CNN's Jim Acosta, a reporter who's supposed to be gathering the news and reporting on the news, not making the news. That's what the actors who are being covered by the reporters do. They're the news makers. So President Trump is the newsmaker. Jim Acosta is the reporter who covers the news being made by not Jim Acosta, but by the president. That's the way it's supposed to work. But that's not the way CNN's Jim Acosta works. Jim Acosta likes to make the news. So Jim Acosta was called on by the president properly, respectfully, during the press conference. The president calls on Jim Acosta, his known antagonist, and Jim Acosta starts. He stands up. He's given the microphone. It's not his microphone. It's owned by the White House. He starts with his, not question, but he says he's going to challenge the president. So Jim Acosta stands up. He's given the opportunity by the President of the United States to ask the President a question. Jim Acosta doesn't ask a question. He says instead, I'm going to challenge you. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's really not your job. You're not on a debate stage with the president. You're not running for office and challenging the other candidate. Your job is to simply report the news. Not according to Jim Acosta. He challenges the president and admonishes the president for referring to the migrant caravan as an invasion. The president says it is. Jim Acosta doesn't accept the answer and continues to push on. The president gives him a little license to make his speech and to grandstand and to generate lots of press coverage for himself. But then at one point, the president has enough and says, okay, you're done. Sit down, sit down, sit down. He repeatedly says, sit down. That's enough. That's enough. You've had your opportunity. You're not asking questions. You're giving speeches, essentially, is what the president was saying. And then you have the kind of the tussle between Acosta and the young female intern. The president was visibly angry at Acosta in his demeanor, his behavior, and his conduct. And so I think that night, the day later, the White House revokes Acosta's press pass to come into the White House and cover for CNN. CNN and Jim Acosta file a federal lawsuit in the federal district court, citing the White House actions infringed upon Acosta's First and Fifth Amendment rights. Fifth Amendment right to due process, First Amendment right to free speech. Yesterday, the federal district court judge issues a temporary restraining order compelling the President of the United States to let Jim Acosta back into his home, back into the White House, and return his press pass to him. Let's open up the phone lines. We'll take some calls. I want to know what my listeners think. Do you think the federal district court judge was correct? Do you think he was right? And that judge was right when he ordered Donald J. Trump to open the doors to Jim Acosta and allow Jim Acosta back in to the president's home. We'll take some phone calls. Wayne from Marietta, you're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Okay, so I do not agree with the judge, because the privilege is a special right granted to somebody. It's not automatic. Look up the definition of privilege in the dictionary. It's a special right or advantage given to an individual. But I think the bigger picture is Acosta is now a national name. He has now made himself known to everybody. And what was his agenda? So his agenda is he can go write books and get talk shows and make money now. Nobody knew who he was yesterday, and everybody knows who he is today. He had an agenda. He played it well. He took advantage of the situation. I think the judge was wrong. I'd toss him out.
Okay, well said. Thanks, Wayne from Marietta. Appreciate that. That was a very succinct answer. You really thought that through. You know, and Jim Acosta is, of course, a national celebrity as a result of his grandstanding and his outrageous demeanor and conduct and the way he treated the president and the way he treats Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And you make a great point. Jim Acosta will write a book now, and he'll make a lot of money. He'll become even wealthier as a result of his grandstanding, not his news reporting. I mean, is Jim Acosta a journalist? I mean, I'm just, this just seems like such a basic common sense point to make. To me, I thought a journalist gathers, covers, and writes about the news being made by the newsmaker. And it doesn't seem to be at all what Jim Acosta is all about. And he came out of that court proceeding and walked over to the White House like a conquering hero. That he is being backed up and sanctioned by a federal district court for his rude and obnoxious behavior. Well, let's set up the phone lines. We'll take some more calls. We have Susan from Harrisburg. You're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Hi, nice to talk to you. I wanted to weigh in on this. I kind of have a different take on it. My first impression when I watched it was I was surprised that that Donald Trump did not, ask the Capitol Police to remove him because he was just so contentious and unruly and not following directions. But having said that, I'm wondering if Acosta is intentionally trying to get the president to lose his cool. People know that he has a temper, and he did briefly walk away from the podium like he was trying to contain himself, and then walk back to the podium. And, they have this this rhetoric that the president is unfit for office and so on and so on. And I just wonder if he wasn't trying to make him totally lose his cool.
Well, Susan, I'll answer your question. I think he absolutely was, and I think that's part of Jim Acosta's modus operandi. And I think that there are amazing, great rewards in the marketplace for alleged journalists who do that. Look at the case of Megyn Kelly during the Fox News debate when she opened with that horrible question that was so obviously designed to put her head-to-head against the leading Republican presidential candidate. And it did. She became a national celebrity. And what did she do? She thereafter left Fox and cashed in and made tens of millions of dollars because of what she had, because of the celebrity status she had developed for herself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Susan, thanks for calling. Appreciate your call and the point you raise. And, these reporters, these journalists, if you will, they apparently are all number one best-selling authors. I turn on Fox News, and I watch Fox News probably more than the other news shows. And every time they bring on a Fox News reporter or journalist or opinion person, he or she is talking about their current number one New York best-selling Times book. I mean, it's quite a business, this journalism business, and you make a name for yourself, and then you cash in and you write a book and you make millions. That seems to be what is motivating some of these alleged journalists. But as a proponent of the free market and the First Amendment, that's certainly acceptable, and that's a part of the country in which we live. But I think a lot of the American people can see it when it happens. I think Megyn Kelly, for example, lost a lot of support among many Americans because of the way she conducted herself vis-a-vis Donald J. Trump when he was the leading Republican candidate. I was texting or tweeting and Facebooking at the time and explaining what I thought she was doing, which was trying to make herself a national celebrity and endear herself to the powers that be that run the media out of New York and Washington, who are more of our liberal Democratic friends, who are much more in charge of the media networks that provide our news to us every day. And that happened to be true. She then left Fox News. She went over to one of the major networks on the Today Show and had a $69 million contract. So she is now incredibly wealthy. Not because of her journalism, not because she was out there like the intrepid reporter gathering the facts and covering the newsmakers. No. She challenged the leading newsmaker of our time. She went one-on-one against him in order to bring her fame up to a much higher level. We'll talk more about this when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Marc Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial where we put America first and we talk about the important legal and political issues of the day. And we're certainly doing that today, talking about the major court case filed by Jim Acosta, the reporter of CNN, against the President of the United States and the White House for revoking his press pass privileges. A federal district court judge, Judge Kelly, a Trump appointee, by the way, has issued a temporary restraining order. He did that yesterday morning, ordering the White House to open its doors and allow Jim Acosta to waltz back in, the conquering hero of the First Amendment. The national media is portraying this, Jim Acosta as well, portrayed this as a great victory for the First Amendment, the right to free speech. However, an important point to raise is the judge in his ruling indicated it was a very limited ruling, and it was on the Fifth Amendment claim, not the First Amendment claim. The Fifth Amendment claim on which is basically a due process claim. The Fifth Amendment gives every American the right to life, liberty, and the protection of property. And apparently Jim Acosta has a liberty or a freedom interest to be in the White House, or maybe he has a property interest in his press pass. And the court was concerned that the government, in this case the White House, took away that right or that liberty or that property without due process of law, without notifying Acosta in advance of the taking and giving Acosta an explanation for why it would take the property or the liberty, and without giving Acosta an opportunity to be heard, for the government to set forth in some sort of administrative or judicial hearing the reasons why it's performing the taking of the liberty interest or the property interest, and then Acosta having the right to rebut or counter the government's reasonings and present his own arguments. That's what due process is, and that's what Judge Kelly found was lacking in the decision by the White House. And we've taken some I think some very interesting calls. It's interesting to learn how astute and intelligent your listening audience is, because they're really nailing this I think down well. And Susan had called and was talking about, and we had another caller talking about how this is more of a privilege than it is a right. And I think I agree. I don't think there is no one can walk into the White House from off the street for any reason. As Barack Obama declared during a White House event in which he had an LGBT activist removed. President Obama said, "This is my house. It's the president's house." And Obama took some flack in conservative circles for saying that, because conservatives were saying, no, it's the people's house. But actually the president occupies the house and runs the household while he's there. And he has the right to allow whomever he wants in or exclude whomever he wants from being there. And that's the point that the president was making. Now he lost. He lost initially that point because he lost the first round of the lawsuit. Now we'll see how the case develops. But the president then was interviewed on Fox News by Chris Wallace today, earlier this morning, and the president announced, well, I can just shut down the whole White House press conference room and not give a press conference in the White House. And that's true. And that seems to be supported by by the ruling by Judge Kelly. And the 1977 case that it appears Judge Kelly was basing his ruling on precedent, that is, where in 1977 the Court of Appeals, the court above Judge Kelly, was essentially saying, look, once you give out these press passes, then you can't revoke them arbitrarily. You have to have notice, you have to have reasons. You're basically conferring a right or a property interest or a liberty interest in those who you have given the press passes to. And so that court was also pointing out, and the president was pointing out today, that the president can just shut down the White House press conference room, just close it, and not allow any reporters in, not have any press passes. Or the president could decide to stop a press conference and to walk away and not answer any questions. And that would seem he would seem to be within his constitutional right to do so. And that's regrettably what the president was indicating is the direction that he's going to take if Jim Acosta and others who have these White House press passes continue to abuse the privilege of being a reporter covering the White House. And that would be unfortunate, I guess, to an extent. But, do we really need these White House press conferences? I mean, is it really critical for the functioning of our government for the Jim Acosta to stand up and blast away at the president and tell the president he doesn't know what words to use and he's misspeaking? And I'm not so sure we need Jim Acosta in the White House. I'm not so sure we need CNN and other reporters in there, perhaps the Republic will survive if we don't have a White House a press conference. Let's take some more calls. John from Harrisburg, you're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing great, John. What's on your mind?
I got a simple question. First Amendment is First Amendment, right?
Yes, sir.
And if Jim Acosta wants to ask, the president has a right to answer or not.
That's right.
My problem is there's too much going on where nobody wants to answer anything. And they want to hide. They want to hide behind the Constitution, but the Constitution is it, right?
That's right.
So, what's the big deal?
Okay, well, John, thanks for calling. John from Harrisburg, appreciate that.
Mark, what I'm saying is, why is it right one time and it's wrong the other? Can you make sense of that?
Well, I'm gonna try. So, why don't you elaborate a little more on the point you're making?
Okay. If he has the right to answer the question, and the president wants to not answer the question, right?
That's right.
Okay. So, since the president doesn't like the answer he wants to give, he says the guy's wrong for answering the question.
Well, I think, and I think
you're a smart attorney, right? You're a smart attorney, correct?
Correct.
You say if your client has nothing smart to say, don't say nothing at all.
Well, in this case...
So what the president's doing is saying, I can't answer you because you're right, so I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to shut you up.
Okay, now I understand what you're saying. All right, so what you're saying is the president could not answer that question correctly because you are agreeing with Jim Acosta that the migrant caravan was not an invasion. And so because the president couldn't answer the question correctly, according to you and Jim Acosta, he just tried to shut Jim Acosta down. Is that the point you're making?
Not according to me, because I have no idea what the caravan is. But the president knows what it is. The president knows what it is, and evidently Jim Acosta thinks he knows what it is. But what I'm saying is, right is right, wrong is wrong, and since he can't answer it to make Jim Acosta happy, and Jim Acosta doesn't want to accept his answer, then we're all in a free-for-all.
That's right. And John from Harrisburg, thanks for calling. And what President Trump is saying in a situation like this, if it were to occur again, he's simply going to end the press conference. And the question is the country harmed if we don't have these full press conferences where reporters are allowed to ask whatever question they want or make statements, render their opinions, do a little grandstanding, because that seems to be what's occurring in these situations. And I, for one, learned nothing from the exchange between Jim Acosta and President Trump. Jim Acosta doesn't like the president's choice of the word invasion. The president has decided he's going to use the word invasion. And now we have a constitutional crisis as a result of Jim Acosta challenging the authority of the president to determine who may have a White House press pass and who may have access to the president to exercise the freedom of the press. So I think, it's an open question if America will suffer, if our republic will suffer as a result of President Trump just deciding to walk off the stage. You saw the president move away from that podium once or twice as if he was done, as if he was going to walk off. But, I wonder if the federal district court judge will order him back on the stage. That'll be interesting to see. But that's the state of the case today. We'll continue to update our listeners as this case progresses. The national media is calling it a major victory for the First Amendment. The president is saying it's a small matter, a small case, and they're going to promulgate some rules and regulations which will govern the press and the White House in these types of situations moving forward. Well, that's about all the time we have today for the Marc Scarinci Show. I want to thank my listeners for listening and for calling in. We always appreciate having the benefit of your views, and this is our forum. This is our First Amendment forum, right? This is your opportunity to express your views on the important legal and political issues of the day. So thanks for listening to the Marc Scarinci Show. Tune in next week, same time, same place.